It's a Football Friday. We're brought to you in part by Landmark Cinemas. And in Landmark Cinemas now, The Monkey. When twin brothers Bill and Hal find their father's old monkey toy in the attic, a series of gruesome deaths start. Starring Tatiana Maslany and Theo James. The Monkey is in Landmark Cinemas now. Okay, as promised, we're going live to Waterloo, Ontario. The CFL on TSN's Jim Barker joins us live from the Combine. And Jim, man, it's been a fast year. Remember doing this last year at this time?
I do. And today we have snow everywhere and it's a mess, but kids are in here busting their rear ends trying to get to the big Combine, which I'll be at in Regina. That'll be on March 20th. I think it's March 20th on your show. On Friday, we'll be in Regina at the regular Combine. So six or seven of these players, maybe 8, will move on to that Combine, which is the Combine where all the top players are at. These are guys who were invited, special invites to come in, and they're doing a good job. There's some interesting players. Today, Rod. Where is Davenport University? Where is Davenport?
Oh my God.
Davenport
you got me.
University. Michigan, which I didn't know. I asked him. It's Michigan. But he had a 38.5-inch vertical jump, and a youngster named Gideon Ajay from University of Calgary, a defensive back, ran a 4.4. I actually had him in 4.38, but he was a 4.4 40, so he's the fastest youngster here. And then they're just getting ready to start throwing. One of the quarterbacks is Jay Vanderjack, who is Mike Vanderjack's son.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of the Colts, and so there's a lot of interest here, and I'm looking forward to the second half of this, which is all one-on-ones, offensive line, and one-on-ones with receivers and DBs and that type of thing. So it's a really good thing. Like I say, 6, 7, 8 of these guys will move on to the big Combine.
We've been very blessed to be able to attend so many of these Combines. And I forget, Jim, sometimes that most of our viewers have not. So would you mind, and they're huge football fans, would you mind taking us inside just what exactly goes on?
Well, at this one, this is a little different. The Combine that's going to happen in Regina is actually a 3-day thing. Actually 4. They'll fly the players in on a Thursday, and they'll have meetings and things with coaches to learn, the kinds of plays they might run in the practices they'll have. They'll meet with teams. Players will meet individually with teamwork coach, and it's a job interview. And they'll go in and interview. And that, to me, was always one of the most important things, is the interview that you do with players. At this regional, it's a little tougher because there's so many guys, and they don't have them assigned. At the big Combine, they'll be assigned and do interviews. And at the NFL Combine, it's the same thing. And a lot of my friends that are in the NFL, they say that interview is really important because you really get to know. We have a young guy I'll give you a great example, Jackson Finley, who will be a top pick from Western Ontario. Now, he's big. He's about 6'3". He's probably be one of the fastest guys at the Combine. He'll run 4.5 or better. A free safety who's a phenomenal player, but he's a pre-med. He's already graduated. He's pre-med. And you wonder, okay, how much is that guy going to want to play? Well, what you do is you find that out at the Combine when you interview them, and you try to feel for if they will continue to play. So those are the kind of things that happen in terms of that. And then we test them in everything. There's a vertical jump, which tests explosiveness. There's a 40-yard dash. There's a certain level a player has to be at to compete at the pro level. If you're going to play corner or defensive back and you can't run under 4.6 and probably under 4.5, you're going to struggle because you can lose games in a hurry with a secondary that can't cover. And so there's things that a guy has to be able to have in order to move forward and get drafted, get signed, and that type of thing. The linemen, the offensive linemen, what they run the 40 in doesn't matter, but they do the bench press and how many times they can bench press 225. And what that shows is for an offensive lineman, it's dedication and weight room and all those kinds of things. It shows whether a guy is dedicated to it. I mean, guys will put up. I heard a guy might have put up 32 today, in the bench press. I've seen a couple go as high as 37 at the regular combine. So, but that's an offensive line test that if a guy doesn't do, I'll give you another example. I had a young guy years ago from Queens, and he did at the East-West game, which is a game that these guys play in before their last year of college in Canada. He did 3 on the bench press. And I told him, I said, if by the combine, you're not doing at least 10, there's no way I can take you to play in the CFL. You're an offensive lineman. You have to have that kind of dedication. And sure enough, he did right at 10, which you'd like him to do more, but he did right at 10. And he ended up going on, played a little bit in the NFL, and then came back. And so you have different tests that different coaches. Chris Jones, everything was about the vertical jump. He wanted that guy who could jump through the roof. That is probably the biggest test of total athleticism. And then they do short shuttles, changing direction, how fast a guy can change direction. So the whole purpose is to get a true vision of how this guy might fit on your football team, both from a personality standpoint and from a physical standpoint.
I really appreciate the explanation. Thank you. What about, we've learned at the NFL Combine, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward won't throw. And as you know, over the years at the CFL Combines, we've had guys that have elected to not participate or not even show up. That used to not be a thing. How's that viewed now by evaluators?
I think nowadays in the NFL, there's so much money at stake. Guys like Shedeur Sanders, scouts are he's either can throw or not throw. He's not going to get anything from his last game to go in there. What they like to see is he'll go through all the tests and the mental tests they give him and the interviews and all that. He's just not going to throw. And again, that's not going to make any difference in his draft value. It's like guys opting out of games. They try to do what's going to be best for their career going forward. Now, if you're a quarterback who might have accuracy Curtis Rourke, he's going to go and he's going to throw. He wants to show exactly what his arm is all about and his accuracy and why he's better than the rest. Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, those guys are being talked about as being the number 1 pick in the draft. They're not going to have to do that. So different guys have different things they have to accomplish at the draft. They have agents who are in their ear. They don't want them to get hurt. That's a big issue. If a guy goes in there and he gets hurt running a 40 or doing something like that, it's going to put him out of all the mini camp things and, could put him out of training camp. So they're very careful about those kinds of things. And at the CFL Combine, there's a lot of contact. Again, fortunately, I can't recall a lot of bad injuries. It's very contained and try to make sure that nobody does get hurt. But there is a lot of contact because that's just part of the way the CFL does it. In the NFL, not near as much. It's all about movement, foot quickness, and things like that. So, again, it's all just part of the evaluation process. In the NFL, the combine has turned into a big deal. It's in Indianapolis right now, but they're talking about moving it around the way they do the draft and, how they just take everything that's just an ordinary function and turn it into a big event. So, but that's the NFL way.
Back to the thing about the guys opting out or not throwing. I saw interviews with coaches and scouts and GMs that said, we'd rather have the face-to-face interviews anyways. And you said earlier how important that is. Can you really get a read in that short amount of time? I've heard it compared to speed dating like you've seen in the movies. A 5-minute conversation, being you go from table to table to table. How much can you really hope to get out of that?
Well, you get a 20 minutes, and in 20 minutes, again, a lot of it is you ask questions. You're just trying to get, for example, guys will go in and you try to get them to badmouth their coaches, like, hey, you didn't catch a ball much. Was there something with how they threw? And try to get them to go in and start badmouthing their, and then okay, we got a guy who's that guy. He's not going to take responsibility. So you have certain questions and things, and the guys are schooled up now, the agents, and even in Canada, Fred Weinrich and Rob Fry, and those guys do a fantastic job of preparing these guys. So when they get the question, back in the old days when we first started doing this, we could nail, we would have guys break down, but now they're so prepared for the questions, and you get a lot of canned answers. And you talked about a Joe at last year's combine, and in the interview, and I interviewed just for TSN, we interviewed a lot of different, and I said to him, I said, you're one of the absolute best athletes here. Now, this was before he ran 4.8, which is not good. But he said, because he didn't run well, and that's what hurt him in the draft, I think, in the CFL draft. But I said, on film, you're one of the best athletes. Just everything you do is athletic. But you're one of the worst football players ever that I've ever seen come through. And he was. He just was not a good football player. He would run into guys. When he was at Clemson, he just didn't do things naturally. And he actually, at the Grey Cup, we did a Saturday show, and he and I were on, and he said, Coach, I have to thank you because that motivated me. I understood I needed to learn how to become a football player. And he took his time in Regina, and people who watch him, he's great naturally. He's just naturally catches the ball well. He's got a lot of natural skills. His problems were he didn't understand the game. And again, that's what they saw in Indianapolis, is a guy who catches the ball naturally, who's 6'5". He's got so much upside. He ran 4.8 at the combine, which is way too slow. But now, maybe they're going to look at him, and who knows what they're going to do with him. But it was a bit of a surprise that he signed. But you could see his athleticism playing for Regina. Yeah, he only caught 20 balls, but he would just catch the ball and do things in the open field that it's hard for rookies to do. So I wish him the best of luck. But those are the kind of things you do at interviews. I challenged players, and they would I'd ask them what they're going to run the next day. And there were the Duncan Busby, that's playing for Saskatchewan now. And he was from Minnesota, Mankato, and I watched him on film, and I said, dude, you're not gonna run 4.75. Watching you're 4.75, 4.8 guy. I coached Division III football. You got great spot quickness because he was a basketball player. Well, he ran a 4.58 at the combine and ran up to where I was and said, I told you I would do it. I told you I would do it. So, there's some neat things that happen in these interviews that, again, some guys they're going to mesh with certain staffs. Some guys aren't. But it is a good time. You maybe don't find out the real truth, but you can find out what kind of a deep down person he is and where he comes from, what his background's like, and potential problems that might happen. You talked about the Regina situation with the fentanyl and as a coach, you want to stay on top of that stuff and know, but there's no way you can know unless they're peddling the stuff in the locker room and somebody will come up and eventually tell you. My guess is he didn't know. And, but again, you try to weed those things out before you get them at your place and find out if they're guys that are going to bring those kind of problems.
So what I'm saying, there's no way they would have known. And I know Mark McConkey personally. There's no way. Hey, Jim, this is so much fun, and I know you got to go, but you just cracked a lid on something that I asked Gil Scott this last night. He gave me his answer. I'm going to ask you now. Chris Sims, I heard him on the radio this week saying he wished he, in his interviews at the Combine, was more bravado, more, because he was a lot of yes, sir, no, sir, very humble. Because I wish I was not as much that and more. What's the best way to conduct yourself for all the young players that might be watching in these interviews?
I think the best thing for anybody going in an interview is to be themselves. Because if you should try to show bravado and you don't know how to do it, and it's not who the real you is, you can end up really giving a bad impression of who you are. I mean, No team wants a guy who it's all about me, and I'm the reason you're going to win, and those kind of, they don't want that. And, so to me, the biggest thing somebody can do is be themselves. And you know what's going to happen? They're going to find their place, a Joe. I mean, teams did not draft him in the CFL. He went all the way to the 7th round. Okay? He learned from that and grew. That's what's going to happen. They're eventually going to find themselves. But if you fake who you are in anything you do, in any kind of interviews, and this is no different than a job interview, you have to be who you are. And I think that's what I can always feel when a guy is who he is. And if he doesn't fit with me, that's okay. He might fit with 7 other teams or 5 other teams, but it's better that he goes somewhere that fits with him, not somewhere where he's faked the people into being something he's not.
Wonderful answer. Jim, thanks for fitting us in because I know how busy you are, man. Enjoy the weekend.
Okay, I will. Thank you, Rod. And you guys I'll see you next week. I'll be back in Toronto.
Awesome. I know it's a one-day event where he is in Waterloo, but have a great weekend anyways. This has been so good. Paul in Humboldt writes in and he says, I love it. Coach Barker can't help but coach up the prospects at the combine. Hey, they say once a coach, always a coach. You don't stop coaching. And I think that's cool as hell. We got some great stuff to get to in a sports update on the way. Viewer takeover the rest of the way on this Football Friday. We're live here on Game Plus Television, streaming live and podcasting wherever the best podcasts are found.